So welcome to Independent Bank's How to Apply webinar for our 2017 grants application cycle. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're excited to have you here. My name is Brianna Adams, and I work as the Community Relations Analyst in Independent Bank's Corporate Responsibility Department. I'm one of the people who answers our grants at ibtx.com email, so some of you might have already spoken with me. In just a few minutes, Kate Perry, our Director of Philanthropy and Special Projects, will begin the presentation. But before we begin, there's just a few housekeeping issues that I want to address before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat box by clicking on the messaging icon in the lower left-hand side of your screen. So it should be blue and white. And if you click on that, it'll pop out and you'll be able to send a message. And Kate and I will be able to see that along with everyone else. So we would love it if just during the presentation you think of a question, type it in, and I will collect those and then pass them on to Kate to answer once the webinar ends. We'll have like a short question and answer session for everyone. If you experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, we hope that doesn't happen, but if it does, there's two things you can do. You can let us know via the chat box in the lower left-hand portion of your screen, or there's also a little hand icon right next to the chat box icon, and if you just click that, you can raise your hand and I can start an individual chat session with you. Finally, the presentation portion of this webinar will be recorded and uploaded onto our Community Grants page tomorrow, Friday, February 17th. So if you just need to review the information, that will be available for everyone as a resource. We also have a PowerPoint version of the presentation uploaded on our Community Grants page as well. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Kate Perry to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Brianna, and good afternoon, everybody. We appreciate you taking the time to join us. As Brianna said, I'm the Director of Philanthropy and Special Projects for Independent, and we are really proud to work with partner organizations across Texas to help create positive change in our communities. Our goal is generally to leverage our organizational strengths to help build healthier, stronger, and more resilient communities. And we think we can do that in a couple different ways. One is, importantly, understanding the greatest needs within our communities, and then by leveraging both our financial assets as well as the talent of our employees. And so part of this initiative is the Independent Bank Community Grants Program, which was launched in 2015. So we're really excited to be going into our third year of that program. Each year we're growing the program, and we're also really encouraged to see the amazing work that our partners are doing out in our communities. So the program is built around our funding priorities that were established for all of our community reinvestment. And we focus on three main areas, which are health and human services, education, and community development. So in community development, we generally support organizations and programs that are working in low to moderate income communities with a focus on small business development, affordable housing, and job training. Within education, we support programs that promote academic achievement for low to moderate income students, those that facilitate merit-based access to higher education for underrepresented groups, and that provide training for teachers and administrators that are working with low to moderate income students. We also are interested in health and human services, where we support organizations that help ensure access to quality health education programs, health care in low to moderate income areas, as well as fund basic needs assistance and child care services, especially when those are offered in tandem with other self-sufficiency initiatives. In thinking about our grant programming, to be eligible, you must be working in at least one of these areas, but we recognize a lot of organizations are going to hit on several of these, and so certainly you can be working in more than one. In terms of allocating our grant resources, they're not they're split up regionally, which I'll talk a little bit more about, but they're not split up in buckets by our funding priorities. So as you're preparing your application, you don't have to designate just one of these in order to get into one of those funding buckets. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is the communities we serve. Our grant programming does focus on supporting low and moderate income communities across our service areas. We operate banking offices throughout North Texas, Waco, Austin, and Houston. You can find a complete list of our locations on our grant website. And in order to be eligible for a grant, you must be serving one of these communities. We sometimes get questions around this related to whether you have to be physically located in the same town as our branches. And the answer is no, you don't have to be. You just need to be serving people in our market areas. If you have any questions about that, I would definitely suggest first to look at the complete list of where we're located, and then second, if you've got particular questions, you're more than welcome to email us. So additional eligibility requirements are that organizations must have a 501c3 tax-exempt designation from the IRS that's current. You do not have to submit that with the letter of inquiry, but if you're invited to submit a full proposal, you'll have to provide that documentation, as well as documentation that supports fiscal and administrative stability. Okay. There are some limitations with our community grants, which are featured on this slide. And I did want to mention that we will post this presentation as well as a recording of the webinar. But generally, we limit grants are intended to serve a benefit to the community. And so our grant funding does not go to sponsorships, events, or projects where we, Independent Bank, or our employees receive tangible benefits or privileges. So activities like golf tournaments, tables, and events, and other fundraising activities, while they may be benefiting your work, are not something that we would fund through our grant programming. We also don't support organizations that are discriminating on the basis of race, gender, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or any other status or other classification that's protected by federal, state, or local law. Similarly, we don't support religious organizations that are not engaged in a significant project that is non-sectarian and that is benefiting a broad base of the community. And we don't support political action committees, political causes, or candidates with our community grants. Okay. So now to a little bit more of the fun stuff. So what kind of types of projects do we look for? In our community grant programming, we're looking to invest in both the scaling of proven ideas that are shown to be effective, as well as the development of promising ideas that could be implemented for the first time. We really embrace and encourage innovation, learning, and adaptation, and especially so when those efforts are rooted in a sound and thoughtful approach, an evidence-based approach to serving our communities more effectively. So I think this is something I would definitely focus on a little bit because one, sort of the evidence base is important. We are looking for you to show why is this the right approach and why is this the most effective. We also support programs that have strong local ties in our local communities. As I mentioned, one of our objectives is to really understand the needs in our communities. And one way we do that is through these partnerships, because we recognize that you guys are the organizations on the ground working directly with our community members, and you'll know the needs in a way that we don't. And so we think those partnerships are really valuable, not just because we can support the work you do, but it helps us understand our communities better. We also support projects that serve our communities more efficiently and effectively. And to this end, we're interested in projects that create cooperation across programs, as well as organizations and funding streams, and programs that are looking to scale best practices, as well as implementing rigorous evaluation techniques. There's a few types of projects that we don't fund, and the big one is we are not generally looking to fund capital projects. We will fund operating expenses as they are appropriate to the proposed project. So we wouldn't fund a grant for exclusively operating expenses, but to the extent that we recognize operating expenses as a key part of delivering other services, we are happy to fund the proportion of delivery that is necessary. And one other thing around that I get a question about fairly frequently, we don't set a hard percentage for operating expenses. We use a rule of thumb to look at the particular work that you're doing and whether those expenses are reasonable. And if you've got particular questions around that, we're happy to field questions. Okay. Another common question we receive about our grants is about the size, because everybody wants to know sort of how much is the target amount. And we do not set a preset amount for our grant size. To date, they've ranged from $5,000 to over $30,000. But the approach that we've taken with this is to encourage organizations to tell us about the work that you feel is most important and impactful for the community you serve, and then build your budget around what it would take to accomplish that. So that being said, I know it can also be really helpful to kind of understand more about what we've funded in the past. And so there's a couple places where you can learn more. One is on our website. We have a list of 2015 and 2016 grant recipients with a summary of the mission of the organization and the grant, what the grant dollars went to and how much was dispersed. And then I'll also highlight a few partners from 2016 just to illustrate sort of some of the variety that we've funded. So Trinity River Mission, for those of you in the Dallas area, you probably know, is a volunteer-based community center which promotes literacy, encourages academic success, and develops effective life skills for disadvantaged youth in West Dallas. And so in 2016, we awarded them a grant of $15,000, which supported their programming in promoting academic achievement. We also funded Project Promise, which is conducted in partnership with Baylor University. And that grant supported the participation of gifted and talented students from low-income backgrounds, helping the students identify short and long-term social and academic goals. And that program also extends support to new families of students. And they do a really great job in collecting data and examining the effectiveness of their program activities. And then down in Houston, we funded Avenue CDC, and their mission is to build affordable homes and strengthen communities, and we provided a grant that supported their general operating efforts and some specific projects to build affordable homes in those communities. So this is just kind of a quick overview. One of the things that you'll notice is a lot of our grants do have a partnership component. It's not a requirement, but it is strongly encouraged because we really think that in order to leverage our community level resources, that collaboration is important. So in part, we're looking for organizations that are engaging with the larger community and thinking outside of their walls. So we encourage projects that are completed in partnership, cooperation, and consultation with other nonprofit agencies, and sometimes even with like academic partners or other business partners. And so another great example of this is like MainGate has been working with a local university to demonstrate the efficacy of their programming. We also are interested in how you're effectively using volunteers and whether you have a board that's diverse and representative of your community and sort of how involved your board is. So this is like more nuts and bolts, and if you've looked at our website by now that you know that we have a two-stage application that begins with a letter of inquiry. Organizations that submit promising letters of inquiry will be invited to submit full proposals, and funding is not guaranteed for those submitting proposals. The LOIs this year will be due by March 10th, to be considered for funding in 2017. And then we'll notify organizations about whether they've been invited to submit a full proposal by March 20th. And then full proposals will be due by April 14th. And funding will come available starting in June. We'll have the full schedule and due dates for each phase posted to the website, so you'll be able to reference that. Also, we kind of wanted to give you just an idea about sort of what we've seen in our programming. We've seen some really exciting growth. Last year, we received letters of inquiry from 127 organizations. We invited 47 to submit full proposals and funded 21 of those organizations. The applicant pool has been really strong, which is exciting for us. But it is important to note that we've got a finite pool of funds, and so full proposals aren't guaranteed to be funded. I wanted to share a little bit about how our proposals are reviewed because I feel like this is an important part of the process. Sometimes we get questions about, does it help to have a relationship with the bank? And there's certainly, in creating the grant process, we really focus on the strength of the proposals and what work is going on in our community and how it benefits the community. And so we've structured our grant review to focus on that. You don't have to have a banking relationship with us to be eligible for our grant. And when you submit an application, it's reviewed by 3 independent reviewers using a common rubric. And those reviewers are people who do not have a relationship with your agency. Our goal with that is to have a fairly neutral process. Okay. So we have a lot of great grant information on the website, which Brianna is regularly updating. And as I mentioned, we are recording this presentation. And so this information and the recording, as well as a copy of the PowerPoint, will be published to the website, so you'll be able to reference back to it. The website is ibtx.com/community, and then just look for the link to grant. This will be the port of, yes.
I'm just going to jump in while we have this page up. If you see this, so ibtx.com, and if you see this About Us tab that hopefully you can all see me highlighting with the yellow highlighter. If you click on that, there'll be like a drop-down menu, and it'll say Community Involvement. And you can either click on that Community Involvement link and then click under Philanthropy and under Community Grants. It says click for more information. You can find it that way, or under the About Us, you can just click directly to Community Grants. So I just want to make sure everyone knew how to get there. But thanks, Kate.
No, that's great. Thank you, Brianna. So once you get to the grant page, starting tomorrow, there will be a link to our online application, which is done through a company called WiseHive, which if you regularly apply for grants, you may have come across for some other applications. You'll have to do a brief registration, which will just ask for you to set up your name and email and to establish a password, which will give you access to your to the web portal where you can submit your letter of inquiry. And Brianna, okay, perfect. So what you'll see once you log in is a screen that looks like this, where you can submit your letter of inquiry. In that letter, we would like for you to tell us about the program or project that you would like Independent Bank to consider funding. You should include an estimate of the cost of the proposed project and the amount of funds you're seeking from Independent Bank. You should outline the results you anticipate being able to achieve for those you serve and how those results are aligned with the bank's funding priorities. You should include information about your organization and ability to implement the program or project, as well as the names, affiliations, and roles of any project or program partners, if you have them. The letter must be no more than 2 pages, and it must be submitted electronically through the application portal, and it must be received by March 10th to be considered for 2017. These instructions for the LOI, there's also a PDF posted to our website with this same summary information. So in terms of evaluating the letter of inquiry, there's a set of questions here that I wanted to share, which are sort of the key things that we're looking at. So of course, we're going to look at the basic criteria about eligibility. So the big one here is aside from funding priorities and finding a match for that, are you serving low and moderate income individuals or families? We sometimes get questions around this because there's different ways to establish whether you're serving low and moderate income. Sometimes it's just evident because of the population you serve. For example, a homeless shelter. We wouldn't necessarily need additional documentation. However, we've also had organizations that provide, for example, like healthcare, mobile healthcare services to different populations. And we worked with them to establish that when they were serving particular geographies, we agreed that that was low and moderate income. Again, if you've got questions, specific questions around your proposal on that requirement, we're happy to field those. We're also going to look at whether the project presents an innovative approach to meeting challenges. Does the project foster collaboration with other area nonprofit community partners? Is there the potential for the project to have a broader impact? For example, if you're down in Austin and you're doing some amazing work, is there an opportunity to share that with Houston and Dallas and maybe replicate effective programming? And then we're interested to learn about what opportunities might exist for our independent bank team to volunteer with your organization. And that might be something that is completed in conjunction with the grant, or it could be just that there's other opportunities. Perhaps you have a board position coming open, or you have an event, or if you're doing like financial literacy. There's any number of ways that our employees engage with nonprofits in our communities, and we would love to learn about those opportunities. So as I mentioned a couple of times already, March 10th is the key date for submitting your letter of inquiry. Those need to be submitted by 10 a.m. Central Time. The portal will close, and it's a hard and fast deadline, so please make sure to get it in by then. If you have questions as you work through your application, we're going to take questions here in just a minute. And then, if you have questions beyond the time of this webinar, we're happy to field those via email at grants@ibtx.com. And so with that, I will hand things back to Brianna.
Okay, so I've been flagging everyone's questions during the presentation, but if you have any more, please feel free to enter them in the chat box, and we will address those before ending the webinar. Okay, so right now it looks like we have two. Cheryl asks, if an agency is awarded funding, do you require they sit out for a certain amount of time before reapplying, or do you accept applications every year without limitations?
Great question. We accept them every year. The only exception would be if we had somebody who had not completed all of their activities for the prior year. Generally agencies are welcome to apply every year, and the way we approach that is that each year we look at the pool of applicants and we rank those proposals and we fund the strongest proposals.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl. And Alicia has a question. She asks, is there a certain percentage of funds that need to be secured before applying? And is there a certain percentage of your funding that is a more competitive ask? For example, would you prefer your ask to be 10% of the budget, 20%, 50%, etc.?
So that varies a lot. It varies a lot. I think we might need to know a little bit more about the nature of your project or proposal. And I think we're open. I think we would be reluctant to fund like 10% of a grant if you had not already got the rest of the funding in place or weren't well on your way to getting the rest of the funding. So I think we would have more concern about how you were filling in the rest of the remaining pieces that you need in order to be implementing that project.
Okay, and I have a question from Steve. Are you looking for volunteer opportunities for individuals or for groups?
Both. So we have over 600 employees across Texas, and so certainly a lot of us do individual volunteering, but also sometimes branches or groups of folks from certain offices will go out and do like service days and things like that. So I think both types of opportunities.
And Kate, while we're still while the webinar is still going on, could you kind of speak a little bit more about how we kind of deal with operating expenses or like overhead, or even just like salaries and how that kind of feeds into funding requests?
Sure. So as I mentioned, we don't set like a hard and fast threshold for operating expenses. What we're looking for is that those are in alignment and make sense based on the project that you're proposing and need support for. In terms of salaries, we recognize that some organizations are like heavily salary driven in order to provide their services. So for example, an organization serving seniors and doing counseling programs and things like that, most of their budget is going to be in salaries to pay for counseling services. And so we're happy to provide grants for those types of things as long as that's directly related to the services you're providing to the community. And then we also, circling back to the question about operating expenses, we're happy to pay the portion of operating expenses that sort of matches that supports those other programs.
Okay, I have another question from Steve. Does this funding come from a company foundation? Does it relate to CRA? Steve, I can tell that you know something about banks.
So this is funding that is allocated off of our general asset size by region, and it's a commitment that our bank leadership has made to giving back to the community. We are housed with our community reinvestment and corporate sustainability folks, and to the extent that these grants serve at low and moderate income areas, we are able to when we have our CRA exam, we do include these contributions as a way to demonstrate some of the work that we're doing in communities.
Okay, if anyone has any more questions, we'll kind of wait a couple minutes for people to think on those and submit them. While we're waiting for those to come in, if you do have any more questions or if something jogs your brain later on in the afternoon, please feel free to email us at grants@ibtx.com. Or if you asked a question and just kind of need to go through specifics with us, we're more than happy to continue this dialogue via email. Also, I do want to reiterate all of our steps for applying can be found online on our community grants page. You can find that at ibtx.com under the About Us section. And we usually try to do a pretty good job of keeping that updated. Also, this webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded sometime tomorrow, Friday, February 17th. The online application portal for letters of inquiry will be going live tomorrow, Friday, February 17th as well. Just want to reiterate that. So don't worry if you can't find it today. It will be available tomorrow. Okay, we have one more question from Diana. I work for an organization that works in both North Texas and Houston. Would you suggest submitting one request to support both communities, or should we identify the greater need?
That's a great question. I would encourage you to identify the greater need and make your application according to that geography.
Thank you, Diana, for that question, and thank you all for being here today. Kate, do you have anything to add before we go?
No, just to say thank you for joining us, and we hope you'll reach out if you have any questions. And if you know of other organizations that might be a fit, please feel free to share the information.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, everyone. We look forward to reading your letters of inquiry. Please feel free to reach out to us. We try to do a good job of responding to emails in a prompt way. So we're excited to hear from you, and I hope you have a lovely weekend. Thank you.